This is a story about how the most successful political party in British history came crashing down in one night.
It was obviously just one of those nights that was punctuated by a lot of horrible news.
It's a story about voters feeling forgotten, with fierce debates on immigration and the NHS.
The world has moved on. People do not remember David Cameron or George Osborne or that cohort of Tories particularly fondly anywhere outside of a Westminster bubble.
It's a story about crumbling trust and leadership challenges.
Nigel Farage at different points in time has had the clear ability to reach out to a particular segment of the electorate.
And how a handful of people shaped the future of British politics forever.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I am sorry. I have given this job my all, but you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change. I will step down as party leader.
He's just entered history as a man who led Britain's most successful political party to its worst ever loss of seats.
We did it!
Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, the shortest ever serving Prime Minister, is out of Parliament.
Shapps, gone. Mordaunt, gone. Keegan, gone. Hart, gone. Fraser, gone. Mercer, gone.
Rees-Mogg, Conservative Party candidate, 15,400.
Goodbye, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
Bristol, you made history today.
It is grim, it is miserable, it is a complete disaster for John Swinney's party.
The working class are coming for you, mate!
Well, this is good preparation for the House of Commons, I suppose. Any more for any more?
Actually, yes!
Trust is a very precious commodity. And I want to thank people for trusting us again.
This is an historic meeting. Here comes the new Prime Minister.
Our country has voted decisively for change, for national renewal and a return of politics to public service. This lack of trust can only be healed by actions, not words. I know that. Our work is urgent, and we begin it today. Thank you very much.
The story of the election was clearly Labour coming back to power for the first time in a generation. And that was what got people excited and got all the headlines. But underneath the surface, why did they come back to power? What was it that meant that they were able to take advantage of that opportunity? And what was going on the right of politics that was so spectacularly unsuccessful at convincing voters in that election?
Breaking Blue, the largest post-election analysis of its kind in British history, revealed why the Conservatives under Rishi Sunak suffered such a dramatic loss. Britain's leading conservative think tank, Onward, teamed up with Focal Data and JL Partners to survey over 74,000 participants, unravelling one of the Conservative Party's worst ever defeats. We identified 3 key reasons why 2019 Tory voters didn't back the Conservatives again in 2024. The number one reason was that immigration was too high. This was followed closely by the view that the party was weak and divided. And lastly, voters felt that public services such as the NHS and the police had got worse.
I think Rishi is one of the hardest working and most capable and decent public servants of our generation. And it is a real sadness that we were never able to show Rishi at his best.
Now I look at Rishi Sunak through rose-tinted glasses. I saw him do a speech the other night at an event for a friend of mine, and I was like, oh God, I longed back for the days of Rishi Sunak. I harked back to think, oh, Rishi, if only we could go back in time. But then I have to remind myself, actually, okay, what was I feeling at the time? Now, he was served a dud. He'd come off the back of a couple of different leadership changes. They'd had big problems there in the Conservative Party. The economy wasn't doing particularly well. He was trying to deal with a mess that wasn't entirely of his own creation. But for me, he just didn't have that sense of rapid urgency.
One of the striking things about the 2024 election is the Conservative Party very disproportionately lost voters, actually, who were late middle-aged, which is kind of a bit of a U-shaped curve. So it lost proportionately more votes amongst the very old. It did very badly amongst the middle-aged and working age. It's really voters to 50 to around 64, where the Conservative Party's basically been hit by a double whammy of defectors to the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrat Party, and disproportionately Reform.
The sort of sleek centrism of David Cameron is dead. And people don't want sort of wooden, careerist, sort of groupthink-prone individuals that, a lot of that One Nation Toryism at the time represented.
People do come to the country and work in the NHS, whether as nurses, doctors or care workers. On the other hand, people who move to the country also use the NHS as well. And I think that's something that a lot of voters feel when they read the newspapers, but also see when they can't get a GP appointment or they go to A&E. And so there's a wider question, I think, about fairness, about citizenship and about access to public services.
I think there's an element of tiredness. I think they've seen the same government in power for about 14 years. But much more, it was the case that a lot of promises were made, things that the party said they would deliver on, that ultimately did not come to fruition. Things like reducing immigration numbers, promises that were made during the Brexit campaign. And that was a primary motivation to lose trust. But just as well, there were also many instances where the public felt that they could not relate to the Conservative Party. Things to do with scandals that made people lose trust.
Perhaps most surprisingly, the report revealed that 2019 Tory voters who backed the Liberal Democrats in 2024 shared similarities with those who supported reform, particularly their concerns about crime and immigration.
I don't want to call anyone idiots because I would never call any voter an idiot, but it does seem to me to be a little bit idiotic that if you are quite, quote unquote, hard right on those core issues that you've just mentioned there about crime, about immigration, all of those things, why on earth would you go from the Tories to Liberal Democrats? They are just softer on all of that stuff. So I think it shows that people were very confused. I also find it amazing, really, that the British public, for my view anyway, are shifting to the right more. They are becoming more conservative, they are becoming more hardline on those issues, and they are looking for a home to go to. But I think ultimately what it must tell you is that in those constituencies, they were desperate to get rid of the Tories.
I'd say the Lib Democrats are less of a political movement, but more of a gentle shuffle forward into irrelevance. They're not really there with ideas, they haven't got the infrastructure, the campaigning, the ability. They're more of a protest party than they are a relevant political force. And it's evident at the last general election that there were, particularly from the report, but otherwise, there was a lot of lending votes just to get the Tories out. And I think Labour sort of benefited from some of those Lib Dem votes too.
Clearly, the Liberal Democrat gains on a seat basis, were larger than the 5 seats that accrued to Reform. But a lot of those Liberal Democrat seat gains, and in fact, many of the 150 plus losses to the Labour Party were due to the Reform Party, basically, going up from a fairly negligible vote share in Brexit, as they were as the Brexit Party in 2019 to today. So actually, many of those Liberal Democrat gains may not have happened with the Reform rise in vote share, and many of the Labour gains were very much predicated on the Reform vote share taking large chunks of the Conservative vote share as well.
They were driven by one common goal, which was not to vote Conservative, but actually their instincts are, despite voting for different parties, very similar. They're actually very robust on illegal immigration. They're perfectly ready to be tough on crime. We shouldn't fall into what is a really easy mistake to make of thinking that because someone voted Liberal Democrat, that they've become a sandal-wearing, ultra liberal individual who doesn't share conservative values.
It's easy to imagine that there is a home counties Conservative who is extremely liberal, and I think David Cameron's coalition gave that impression. Now, I think there is a sense in which that Cameron 2015 coalition is gone and not coming back, but more to the point, the kind of voters I think that are lumped together in that coalition, many of whom have gone off to the Lib Dems, are actually much more homogenous with a national group of voters.
These switchers are actually a different kind of voter. They tend to be older, non-graduates, they're largely white. Most of them actually voted Leave if they voted in the 2016 referendum. They've got hawkish views on immigration, and they tend to be outright homeowners as well, and what we call C2 social grade. So that's the sort of the upper end of the working class, or the lower end of socioeconomically of the middle class. So these are kind of provincial, non-graduate voters who are actually quite right-wing on a lot of issues. But they were usually living in constituencies where the Liberal Democrats were the main opposition to the Tories, and so they voted for them to get the Conservatives out.
Is there a way back for the Conservative Party? The numbers say yes, but it would mean backing tighter immigration controls, cutting taxes for lower and middle income earners, proven competence, strong crackdowns on crime, and a stand against excessive political correctness.
For too long, we've accepted what has been a sort of Treasury and big business line that immigration is really good for economic growth. And the evidence doesn't really support that. Different types of immigration have very different consequences. But the main point I would take away is that low-skilled migration, which has been, I'm afraid, a lot of what we've had over recent years, carries real costs that actually outweigh any economic uplift.
There's a future where we don't have a bloated state, doubling up on jobs, heavy on administration, little on output, 11 till 3 on a full-time salary, that we can make more efficient within the government. Some of their systems are still being run on things designed in 1976. Making the state more efficient, smaller, allowing businesses to work, in partnership with the public sector. And that is through the planning system and changes to be made. That has a greater good approach. Through that growth, people can have tax cuts.
The most interesting part about people's policy preferences, and it is one that is still true today, is that the public don't trust a single party to deliver on all of this. It's not that the Tories were lagging behind Labour by a significant margin. It's that the number one choice for everyone was that they did not trust a single party to be able to fix the big problems in the NHS and bring down immigration numbers. It seems to be a challenge that is insurmountable to the public at the moment.
In terms of the future of the Conservative Party, what I can say is that England in particular, perhaps as distinct from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, is a small c Conservative place. If you look at voters' values rather than who they voted for, their values are broadly Conservative. More than 40% of voters voted either Tory or Reform at the last election, compared to only 33% of voters who voted for the Labour Party. Now, the issue for the Conservatives is that they are currently not converting those instincts, those beliefs of Conservative-leaning voters into votes for the Tory party, and that is a brand problem, and it's a trust problem, and it's also partly an age problem, because there's a lot of younger voters, and by younger, I mean by Conservative standards, this is under 60, who've got Conservative values, but they're not going to the Conservative Party. They've got no historic loyalty to it. What they are doing is they're either not voting or they're being attracted by Reform. So what the Conservative Party needs to do if it's going to survive is identify what those issues are, tap into the needs and values of those voters, and actually capture that vote.
I went up to Stanley in County Durham, which actually ironically has road names there like Lenin Terrace and Marks Avenue and Keir Hardie Way, or places like that. So dyed-in-the-wool, traditional Labour pit towns. They are, salt of the earth as far as I'm concerned. They absolutely hate the idea of this rubbish, woke blob that we have now. People who are unelected, you never know really who they are, but ultimately seem to have their hands on the levers of power.
We've got to get growth up so that we can raise living standards, improve public services and give people back their faith in this country. And we've got to fix our social contract. We've got to make sure that there are the homes people need, that they can afford to raise a family, and that they're confident that our borders are secure and that the people who come to this country actually integrate rather than live parallel lives. We've got to address the reasons why people were so angry in 2024, and if we do that, then we can win.
As the Conservatives stand at this critical juncture, Is this the end of an era for the Tory party? Or will they rise once more from the ashes, rejuvenated by fresh leadership? Or familiar faces?